Yeah, it turns out the conditional has a couple of what they are terming here related statements. So it's statements, compound statements using the same components, but kind of rearranging them or changing them just a little bit. That's what we're talking about here. So let's just do it this way. All right, so let's say we've got the conditional statement, if P, then Q. So let's just use sort of a mix of symbols and words. We'll use the words, but use the statement. And statements as symbols. All right, so let's start with the first one here. The first related statement is, let's just do the converse. What the converse does to a conditional statement is the way I term it is it flips it. Flips it around. Now, what I mean by flip it, I mean change the if part to the then part, and the then part to the if part. So the converse of this is going to be if Q, then P. See what I mean by flipping it? See what I did there? I just flipped the P and the Q around, right? If Q, then P. So I flipped it. That's my term. Okay? Not the technical term, but that's what the converse does. It flips it. The second one is the inverse. And the inverse doesn't flip it. The inverse just negates both statements. The inverse negates both statements. So going back to this one now, the original statement is if P then Q, so I'm not going to flip those, I'm just going to negate them. So if not P, then not Q. And we'll do an example with words, because that's what they'll have you do on our examples there. Okay? So converse flips, inverse negates. And then the third one is called the contrapositive. It's a bigger term. And actually that makes it easy to remember because contrapositive. Because what the contrapositive does is it does both. It flips and negates. So it makes it easier. All right, so I'm going to take this statement, I'm going to flip it and negate it. So what would that be? If, flip and negate. So if not Q, then not P. Okay? All right, so let's do an example. All right, so if I finish studying, then I will go to the party. If I finish studying, then I will go to the party. All right, so let's write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. So, that over. So the converse just flips those around. Changes the if part to the then part, and the then part to the if part. So, if the if part then is the then part. So if I will go to the party, then I finish studying. the inverse, what would the inverse be? Well, the inverse negates them. Doesn't flip them around, just negates them. So I'm going to leave them in the same order, but negate them. So if I do not finish studying, or if I don't finish studying, then I won't go to the party. That's the inverse. And then the contrapositive does both. Flips and negates. So if I won't go to the party, so I flip this one to the if part and negate it. So if I won't go to the party, then I don't finish studying. Okay? So it's just, again, just remembering which they call which. Converse flips, inverse negates, and then the contrapositive does both, flips and negates. Question or concern? Let me do one more. Make it a little shorter maybe, but I was trying to think of one. Let's say I have this. I don't think so. One with, okay, let's see. Cats don't have feathers. Cats don't have feathers. Now, if I want to write a converse, inverse, and contrapositive of that, what do you think I probably should do? Put it in if-then form, okay? So if I want to write a contrapositive of a statement such as this, the converse and inverse and contrapositive are based on if-then statements. So I need to write this in if-then form first. And so it's kind of like the ones we were talking about earlier. I need to have two parts here. The two parts here are what? Cats and don't have feathers. So if it's a cat, then it doesn't have feathers. With me on that? Is that okay? So now I can write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. The converse of that. All right, so in this case, to do the converse, what does the converse do? Flips it. Converse flips. So if the then part becomes the if part, so if it doesn't have feathers, so I don't change it, it just becomes the if part. So if it doesn't have feathers, then it's a cat. Okay? The inverse, well, the inverse negates. So I leave them in the same order, but just negate them. So if, negate. If it's not a cat, then it does have feathers, or just say it has feathers. Word that. Okay? And then last but not least, the contrapositive, what does it do? It does both. Flips and negates. So if, so I flip this to the if part and negate it. So in that case, how do I negate that? It doesn't have feathers. How would it negate that?
It does.
It does have feathers, yeah. Just take the not part out, right? Which was what I did there. So if it does have feathers, then it's not a cat. Yeah. Yeah, to negate something that has not in it, you just take the not out, right? Most of the time. All right. While we're thinking of this, let me do one last thing with you, and that is talk about, so we've got these three statements, and it turns out one of them is the same as the conditional, and the other two are not the same as the conditional. So let me just show you that. Yeah, so here's the question. Converse, inverse, contrapositive. Which one is equivalent to the original statement? So you got those three, and I'm telling you one of them is equivalent and two of them are not. How do we decide? Well, the way we can decide equivalent statements would make sense that those are statements that have the same truth table, same truth values. Yeah, what I mean by equivalent is they have the same truth values. In other words, there's the same in all cases. And so that's what I'm going to look at. I'm just going to look at these statements here on a truth table. PQ, true, 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 false, false, true, false, false. Real quick here, to give us a little more practice on these. All right, so the original statement is going to be if P then Q, or P arrow Q. Well, we know how that statement works. We know how. We may have trouble with it, but true arrow true is true. True arrow false is false. That's the only one that's false, right? F arrow T is true, and F arrow F is true. So we already did that one. So let's examine, first of all, the converse. See if it's equivalent. Well, the converse of this statement would be flip it, right? If Q, then P, or Q arrow P. Well, if I do Q arrow P, I should write those. So the first one, flip it, so it's true arrow true. That's true, right? The second one, Q arrow P, would be false arrow true. False here, true here, so that's true. The third one, flip it, so you got true arrow false. True arrow false, don't we? That's false. And then false arrow false, that is true. So this is what we're comparing. Are these two the same? This one's true, false, true, 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 false, true. They've got 3 and 1, 3 trues, 1 false, but they're in a different order, aren't they? So this one isn't equivalent. That's what we get from that, because it doesn't have the same truth values. It's not equivalent. So the inverse is the negation, so that's not P, arrow not Q. All right, so let's go ahead and write these. All right, so not P would be false all the way down the line. False, false, true, true. Not Q is false, true, false, true. So let's arrow those together real quick here. Maybe going too fast. False arrow false is true. False arrow true is true. It's only false if it's T arrow F. And then T arrow F, that's where it's false. And then T arrow T. Again, compare this to that. It's not the same. So that leaves, last but not least, the contrapositive. I've already said one of them's the same. So that better be it, right? So the contrapositive flips and negates, so it'd be not Q, arrow not P, right? Flip and negate, we're going back to this one. So flip and negate that. All right, so not Q, I've got false, true, and then false, false, true, true. Arrow those together, you got false arrow false is true arrow false is false arrow true, true arrow true is true. So, those two are the same, aren't they? Yeah, it turns out, and we'll do some more next time, but yeah, the contrapositive is equivalent to, let me write it down. The contrapositive is equivalent to the conditional statement. Keep that in mind. We'll explore that more next time. All right. So it's the contrapositive. The other two are not the same as the conditional statements.